Tell me all about John Trainer, because you have quite a background, and you went from MedImmune to now NexImmune, and I want to know about the naming convention. Is the only kind of company that you're going to work with, is the next one 3Immune or 3Immune or Triimmune? What's it going to be?
Wrong, a little bit wrong sometimes. NexImmune is a T-cell biology company, and what that means is that we are very focused on trying to get T-cells to do what we want them to do. Mm-hmm. And just to take a step back for a second and a little bit of biology. So T cells, we can call them as the foot soldiers of the immune system. These are the cells that are doing most of the killing of what we don't want in our bodies. What's often underappreciated, though, is that T cells only work when they get instructions about what to do. And those instructions in healthy people usually comes from dendritic cells. But in cancers or other diseases, that communication between the dendritic cell and the T cell can become disrupted. In some cancers even, they can corrupt the dendritic cell and render the entire dendritic cell dysfunctional. And so the big, bold idea from our founding scientists at Johns Hopkins University was to say, what if we create a synthetic dendritic cell, an artificial dendritic cell? If we do that, we can program that dendritic cell to target specific T cells with specific instructions, and that way we can get the T cells to do what we want them to do. Is also the benefit of we're achieving this without doing any genetic engineering. There's no viral vectors. There's no DNA manipulation. It's just the natural T cell doing what we want it to do. And that's what our scientists built, and that's what our company is built around. It's a nanoparticle with proteins that otherwise would be found on dendritic cells. We can deliver both sort of what we call signal 1, antigen recognition or antigen identification signals, but also signal 2, the co-stimulatory signal, which essentially tells the T cells that we're activating what to do. Do we want them to intensify their behavior, which is what you might want to do in cancer or against infectious diseases? Or alternatively, do we want to deliver a down-regulatory message, which you might want to do if you're targeting autoreactive T cell, right, in autoimmune conditions? And so having sort of the T cell, or the artificial dendritic cell, I should say, that can talk to the T cell with those very specific instructions gives you a lot of influence over how the immune system works. The dendritic cell has often been compared to the conductor of the immune system. When you sort of control the conductor, that gives you very wide influence.
That just sounds amazing. So what you're saying is that you're taking the mechanism of action of the whole communication in the immune system that directs it, and you're able to create an artificial signal in there through the dendritic cell by having this synthetic dendritic cell that has tremendous control over the immune reaction to anything, either upregulating it, so if you want to eat away cancer, you can dial it up, and if you want to prevent autoimmune, you can dial it down. I mean, that just sounds incredible, the breadth of that.
Well, what it does is it gives you a lot of different things that you can do. So for instance, we can use this technology to activate T cells against multiple antigens. So rather than having, for instance, like a CAR T against one target like CD19, right, we can put different antigens in our nanoparticles, so we can activate T cells against target 1, target 2, target 3, target 4, target 5. We've tested up to 9, although we have 5 in our clinical trials right now.
Wow.
It also means you can target certain kinds of T cells. So the phenotypes we go after are, let's say, the stem cell-like memory T cells or the central memory T cells. These are the T cells that are self-renewing and persist for years or even decades inside the body. So instead of having a short, intense reaction, like you might get with many CAR Ts, you have the kind of T cells that will be generating new effector T cells and ultimately new or long-term responses against, for instance, a cancer for long periods of time. Another thing you can do is go after the right phenotypes of T cells. One of the challenges we run into sometimes in sort of T cell engineering is we will develop very powerful T cells, effector T cells, but they have a very short lifespan, right? And so they will fight a cancer, for instance. In the case of CAR Ts, very hard, but then these cells will die. We can activate naive T cells that become stem cell-like memory T cells or central memory T cells. These are the self-renewing populations.
Wow.
That will essentially be a lasting presence in your body. And instead of that lasting for sort of days or weeks, these are the cells that last for months, years, possibly even decades in the case of stem cell memory like T cells.
Right.
So that gives you sort of a long-term persistence as opposed to just sort of a short, burn hot but then burn out. And we've seen in a lot of the CAR T data that that's actually an issue coming around a lot of the CAR Ts is the product doesn't last very long. So getting the right phenotype of T cells is critical, and that's one thing that we can do very easily.
So there's many bites at the apple with this technology.
Yeah, it's very true. We're starting, of course, in liquid tumors, but one of the things we're most excited about is our pivot to solid tumors, which we're working on actively. And then as the injectable version of this technology, the autoimmune conditions that sort of are out there, type 1 diabetes, multiple sclerosis, almost anything, so many rare diseases in autoimmune that we can really customize our particles to go after. It's very powerful.
This is a major unmet need out there. Because the current types of drugs that are offered for those conditions are just not effective enough, and with many side effects as well. And so the narrow targeting of this, the specificity of this, is a really powerful element.
Yeah, we think this is technology that could be at the center of a lot of immune therapy across many different kinds of conditions for years to come.
It really sounds like it. So what gives you confidence that this will work?
Well, we're in the clinic. We're in the clinic. We have 2 programs, our NexI-001 program against AML, acute myeloid lymphoma, and multiple myeloma is our 002 program. And being in the clinic with these 2 programs means we've gotten some early data back. We, for instance, had a presentation at ASH back in December, and a lot of this data was actually included in our S1. But when you start out your clinical trial, you start with the lowest doses and often the most difficult patients. And so we were very keen to see what kind of results we would get. And again, from a safety perspective, from a sort of immunology perspective, are the sort of cells that we've done, are they doing what you'd want them to see? And even from the clinical perspective, we're starting to see things that make us really excited. It was one of the reasons we went public back in February. It helped us we raised about $120 million, and it gave the validation we're seeing so far has given us the confidence to sort of spend more heavily on advancing the pipeline, advancing other indications to grow the company. So it's an exciting time at NexImmune.
That's tremendous. Now, on that path, who do you see as your competition? Is there any companies out there that directly compete with you, or is it all just different approaches to some of the same diseases?
I mean, as you well know, when you're working in immunotherapy, there's so much attention that's going into the space, and so many companies that are trying different ways to sort of impact the immune system, or even T cells specifically. And so on some level, we're competing in that field. Now, I think we're very much doing our own thing, right? We are not another autologous, CAR T therapy, coming in. Of which
I think there's like
hundreds.
150 of those. Yeah, right.
If not more.
It's huge. Yeah.
Yeah, we're really doing something, specific and different that we think has got a really different approach.
And a proprietary technology that you've got patented.
Absolutely.
And exclusive and all that, right?
Patented up, all the way to the moon and back. But you're right. And so being able to go after multiple targets, being able to target the right phenotypes that give you that long-term persistence, with the sort of natural killing and safety profile, that's something I think a little bit different. I think working with a synthetic dendritic cell, there are other companies that have recognized, another big category besides the CAR Ts, there are cancer vaccine companies saying if we can get antigens, dendritic cells might be able to pick them up and otherwise deliver those instructions to T cells. There's a lot of focus on that. Again, we think that sometimes those instructions from the dendritic cell can get corrupted and don't really make it to the T cell. So we like talking directly to the T cell. We think is a way that's going to have more long-term effect. We tip our hats every day to companies like Iovance out there, who I think have shown really well that natural T cells can clear tumor, and that's even solid tumor. They're seeing some results. They've got some other issues they're going through right now, but that doesn't change the issue around natural T cells are clearing solid tumor. And I think it's one of those things that we're all learning so much about the immune system and what it can do against viruses, against tumors and autoimmune conditions, that anytime we see new data coming out, it's helpful, it's to the good. We think it sort of builds the case for what the immune system can do. We like our technology and the way we're getting at it. We think ultimately it's more powerful.
You've been on both sides of this, right? Because you were at NexImmune while it was a private company. You were at NexImmune now that it's a public company, and you've got this completely different situation. Tell us some war stories. Now that you've got all this money in the bank, tell us some of the war stories from being a smaller company that might inspire our audience to know to stick with it and you can be successful in this way.
And I know, Jeff, you've been on all sides of this as well over the course of your career, and you know that the answer is you just have to keep telling your story, right? You have to keep doing a good job developing your technology. And you keep introducing it to more people, right? You've got to tell people in a compelling way what it does. And as you know, a lot of people who might be considering investing or giving money, 90% of them will say no for reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with you at all, but just in terms of the strategy of what they're looking for financing or other things they're looking at. Maybe they've already invested in the field or in a technology that might be similar to yours.
So looking back at 20 years almost, or more than 20 years here in DNA Valley, what are you most proud of in that time?
I think I'll answer that in two ways. I suppose there's sort of, personally, and then especially when you think about the last year and what we've all been through relative to the pandemic, there's some things, at NexImmune that we're particularly proud of. I've personally, a lot of my career has been in working on the business side of science and working with some amazing scientists and amazing doctors. And when I'm doing my job well, it helps them do better science and treat patients, better than they might have been able to do otherwise. Putting together, collaborations and sort of matching technologies with resources to be able to help those get to patients faster. That's really hard to do in our industry. And when I get that right, when we're able to discover a new program or technology, or sometimes out-license, right? Liberate. When we spun out Viella, which was a company around here, that gives me anyway a lot of satisfaction about saying, wow, because of the job that I did, even though I'm not a scientist and I'm not a doctor, but I help patients today, right? This is going to really rebound, and if I'm doing my job well, the scientists and doctors will be able to do their job well. So that's some of the deals that I look back on where we're able to do that, like the Viella spin-out, like some of the big collaborations that we did at MedImmune, like some of MedImmune's move into immuno-oncology and AstraZeneca's move to immuno-oncology. Those are look back on and say that's
You really see the
you
actual
can see the
impact on,
that you're having later on.
So is DNA Valley the right place to grow this company? What are the positives? What are the more challenging aspects of it? What do you see the future of this area and how it's going to impact NexImmune?
I think that you look at DNA Valley now, and it's probably the third or fourth biggest biotech cluster in the country, right? You've got biotech in Boston and San Francisco, of course, but then after that, the number of companies, the number of people, the amount of space that we've got here, I think is sometimes underappreciated, just how active this territory is. Now, our technology came out of Johns Hopkins and was picked up initially by a local entrepreneur, which kept it in the area, right? A lot of technology that comes out of Johns Hopkins will be sort of snapped up by some of the VCs in Boston or San Francisco, and they'll build companies around them there. We had a chance to build a company here and took advantage of a lot of the local talent that was here. Scott Karmer, our CEO, had a background at Amgen and Genentech, but had been at MedImmune. We also have a background of folks at Celgene who are close enough to sort of work. I came from MedImmune. Another one of our officers, Christy Jones, also came from MedImmune. And so there was a good local talent base that sort of came in and helped this company build. I think what keeps it here, besides the fact that now we've got a well-established management team that's here, is the right mix of talent, ability to hire people who, by the way, really love living here. Boston and San Francisco are nice places, but I think it's hard to argue that the quality of life in the DMV here is not higher than what you're seeing there.
Yeah.
And also the right cost. Again, from a CFO's perspective, the infrastructure costs of building out a company. Down here, quite honestly, lab space costs, half to sometimes 2/3 as much as what you're seeing in some of these territories. And that makes it a lot easier to support growing companies as you come out. I think some of the classic challenges that we faced historically, people say, oh, there's not enough venture capital down here. Oh, there may be not enough people down here to do things. That may have been true 10 years ago, but I think we're seeing more and more of that come in. It's not going to happen overnight, right? It's not going to be we're not going to be Boston tomorrow. But I think a lot of people are recognizing what's here and the virtuous circle, right, of sort of money. There's always been great ideas coming out of the universities like Hopkins or even NIH or a few other places. The ideas are always here. But the virtuous circle of the people and the money coming in to sort of pick those up, I mean, now there are companies all over the place.
Well, you've already been at one very successful company, MedImmune, right? And a lot of the people that staff your, that are the executives at your company right now come from there. So that's a workforce thing, right? You've got experienced executive talent here. But also a lot of people have money from MedImmune, right? And you talked about the lifestyle here. You've been here for 20 years. Are you going to stay here after you make a giant score on this company too? Will you stay here and be a VC or sit on the board or start another company?
I love it here. And I think all of us as sort of biotech leaders have a responsibility to help the area grow. And that comes from working with other companies, serving on their boards, mentoring the leaders, helping them have connections they may not have on their own to venture capitalists, pulling venture capitalists in here and spotlighting other companies that could be really interesting to them. There is so much happening here, and I think one of the issues is we don't always know ourselves, everything that's going on. The other thing that you see is we're very big of a locus for companies ex-US to come here. A lot of times when people are accessing the US market, where do they come? To the FDA. Right? And so it's very easy for them to sort of also put their U.S. operations headquarters here. You have the transportation links, of course, between BWI, Dulles, and National Airport. It makes it just easy to get anywhere. And so people, I think, don't appreciate also the very heavy concentration of sort of European and Asian companies, pharma and biotech, that are located here.
Yeah.
So that's another real strength driving it.
I see a tremendous number of large companies putting a footprint down here. I mean, where did Gilead send Kite when after they made that gigantic purchase? And so that's up in Frederick, but it also looks like Montgomery County has really become kind of the foundation of this growth of DNA Valley. I think it'll go all the way up to Baltimore. It's already having a big impact there, and Frederick is growing like crazy. A lot of good companies moving into this whole area, and like you said, there's still plenty of room. I mean, that's really something like if you want to go start a company out in Silicon Valley now, you are going to be squeezed, and your employees are going to be in outrageous traffic. I mean, we complain about the traffic around here, but it's nothing like
Don't
San
get stuck
Francisco.
On 95,
Yeah, and the costs are just crazy. And then you get up to Boston, and you have the same traffic problem in worse weather. So this is like Miami. I grew up in Boston. I always say that like Montgomery County is like Miami compared to where I grew up.
True.
Right?
It's so true. I'm a transplanted Bostonian as well, and I
Really?
love it down here.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. But I agree with you. This is a fantastic place and sort of the right balance for me.
Yeah, you brought up a very interesting point, which is technology adoption curves, and the fact that this went through an irrational exuberance phase of gene and cell therapy, and then it had a disappointment phase. But ever since then, around sort of, let's say the low point seemed to be about 2006, 2007, maybe 2004 through 2007. Of course, I didn't get into this until 2006. But it seems like it's been on an upward slope ever since. And how long can this go? I mean, what's the future of gene and cell therapy in your mind? What is the possibilities within this area? How long could this boom last?
Well, let me talk about, first of all, the sort of the area view, and then we can talk about gene and cell therapy.
Yeah.
From this area, I think two big things were happening at that time. One was the acquisition of MedImmune by AstraZeneca. The other was the acquisition of Human Genome Sciences by Glaxo. And there were two different stories of what happened there. In particular, Human Genome Sciences was relatively shut down by Glaxo. And that took one of the engines, right out of the industry, right?
Yeah.
Big hiring centers, big center of science,
Sure.
Collector of talent. And at MedImmune, that didn't happen as much. AstraZeneca, didn't shut it down and kept it going. But those were tough times as a result. Now, what happened to all those people? Well, I think when you want to talk about what's been driving the boom, right? When you have people who sort of went through that, they found new ideas, right? They found new money, and that sort of has been a virtuous cycle that I think we are still riding. We are now creating more entrepreneurs, right? Who have more access to ideas and more access to money, and that has been growing. Now, how far can it grow? I don't think there's a limit to that, right? I mean, you can look at what makes great biotech clusters continue to work, right? Classically, there's some sort of where do new ideas come out of, right? The academic scenes in Boston or San Francisco, we've got that down here between the federal government, Johns Hopkins, and other universities like George Smith. There's a lot of really cool things happening that can continue to drive this forward. We have the unique virtues of the FDA and the NIH, right? They're never going anywhere, and they're going to be right here, and that will continue to give us, wind underneath our wings for as far as we want to go.
Very exciting talking to you. You have any closing advice for all the entrepreneurs out there, and just tips and tricks, and any closing comments you'd like to make?
I think sometimes in our area, one of the things that we can do better is we can be better networked as a region. And I think people who are starting out sometimes don't know the kinds of resources that could be out there, or how they can grow their company, or where they can look for funding. And I would say to everybody that's out there, don't be afraid to sort of raise your eyes. Go to BioHealth Innovations, go to MD Bio, go to you, go to me. Are there things that we can do to help people grow their companies? Because there are, and you're not alone in doing it. And I think that's a message that's very important to send, and that's how we continue to grow this space.
That's such great advice. You're telling them, tell your story, get out there and talk to the people that are interested in hearing it. That's how you did it, right? I mean, that's the story of NexImmune. It's
That's
the story
exactly
of
right.
a lot of the successful companies around here, and great advice. So thank you again for joining
Thanks,
us
Jeff.
on the
It was
program.
a real pleasure. Yeah.